Hello friends, my wife, Emily, and I have been together for 9 years, married for 6. She was my best friend before she became my wife. We had that relationship people envied. At least, that's what I thought. We traveled together, laughed together, talked about everything. She was the person I trusted most in the world. I never once doubted her love for me. She was charming, beautiful, and had this way of making me feel like the most important person in the room. Maybe that was my first mistake. Believing that the way she made me feel was proof that she would never hurt me. It started with small things. The kind of changes you notice but don't immediately question because you don't want to seem paranoid. She started staying out later than usual. Not by hours, just 30 minutes here, an hour there. She had always had friends, always gone out with them, and I never minded. But suddenly, she was vague about where she was going. She would get dressed up more often, take longer to get ready, and when I asked who she was meeting, she would just shrug and say, "Oh, just some people from work." Then came the phone. Emily used to be the type of person who would leave her phone lying around, unlocked, completely uninterested in privacy because she had nothing to hide. But that changed. She started keeping it on her at all times, tilting the screen away from me, setting her phone face down when we sat together. She changed her passcode, claiming she had forgotten the old one. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was overthinking things, that she was just going through a phase. People change, right? Maybe she was just trying to feel young again, trying to reconnect with her social life after years of being the married woman in her friend group. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that, but then, it got worse. She became distant. Not just emotionally, but physically. I would reach for her at night, and she would shift away, claiming she was tired. She stopped initiating anything between us. When I kissed her, she barely kissed back. It felt like I was touching a stranger. She started picking fights over nothing. I would ask if she wanted to watch a movie, and she would snap that she was too busy. If I asked how her day was, she would sigh like I was interrogating her. Every small conversation turned into an argument. She made me feel like I was annoying her just by existing. And then, there was him, Liam. My best friend since college. The guy who had been there for me through everything. He was the person I trusted the most outside of my marriage. He had been at our wedding, had given a speech about how lucky I was to have Emily, had been the guy I called whenever I needed advice or just someone to talk to. He was practically family, and now, looking back, I hate myself for not seeing it sooner. Emily and Liam had always been friendly. That wasn't new. They got along well, had inside jokes, texted each other occasionally. But I had never thought anything of it. Until recently I started noticing little things. The way Emily would light up when she got a message, only to quickly swipe it away when she saw me looking. The way she laughed just a little too much at his jokes when we all hung out together. The way she would mention his name more and more often, casually slipping him into conversations that had nothing to do with him. And then, one night, she came home late, too late. She had told me she was going to dinner with a couple of her coworkers. It was supposed to be a quick thing, just a few drinks, nothing major. But when I checked the time, it was past midnight, and she still wasn't home. I called her. No answer. I texted. Nothing. An hour later, she finally walked in the door, her hair slightly messy, the smell of cologne that wasn't mine lingering on her clothes. I asked her where she had been. She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes, acting like I was being unreasonable. She told me she had lost track of time, that she had left her phone in her purse and hadn't heard my calls. She said she was with coworkers, but when I asked for names, she got defensive. Told me I was acting insecure. That I was being ridiculous, and that was when the gut feeling I had been trying to ignore finally became impossible to push aside. Something was wrong. Emily was lying to me, and I was going to find out why. I spent the next few days pretending that everything was normal while inside, I felt like my world was shifting beneath my feet. It was like I had been dropped into an alternate reality where nothing was what it seemed. I went through the motions of daily life, waking up, going to work, eating dinner with Emily, while my mind was constantly racing, analyzing every little thing, replaying every suspicious moment, searching for clues in the memories I had once ignored. The way she glanced at her phone and smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she would come home and immediately go to the bathroom, as if trying to wash something away. The way she had started dressing differently, putting in extra effort, always making sure she looked perfect before leaving the house, even when she claimed she was just running errands. I tried to act normal, to hide the growing storm inside me, but it wasn't easy. Every time she touched her phone, my stomach twisted. Every time she laughed a little too hard at a text message, my heart pounded. I found myself watching her, studying her, trying to decipher what was real and what was a lie. It was exhausting. But the worst part was that I was starting to doubt myself. I had spent years trusting Emily without question, and now I was questioning everything. Was I imagining things? Was I being paranoid? Was I letting my own insecurities create a problem where there wasn't one? But the signs kept piling up, and the more I paid attention, the clearer it became. She was hiding something. And whatever it was, she was working hard to make sure I didn't find out. I didn't have concrete proof yet, nothing undeniable, nothing I could hold up and say, this is it. This is the truth. But I had something more powerful than proof. I had a feeling. A deep, gut-wrenching certainty that something was very, very wrong. And then, I found the first real piece of evidence. One night, she was in the shower, her phone left charging on the nightstand. That alone was unusual. She never left it unattended anymore. It was always in her hand, always within reach. But this time, she must have been in a rush because she didn't take it with her. I didn't go looking for anything. I didn't even touch it. But when I glanced over, I saw the screen light up with a new message. The contact name wasn't saved, just a random number, but the preview of the message was enough to make my blood run cold. It was something casual, something meaningless on the surface. But it was the kind of message you don't send to a friend. It was personal. Familiar. The kind of message that spoke of an ongoing conversation, a relationship that was deeper than just casual chatting. I felt my entire body tense. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened her phone, my hands shaking, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The messages were there, right in front of me, and they told me everything I needed to know. She had been talking to someone for weeks. Maybe longer. Their conversations were filled with inside jokes, flirtation, little comments that hinted at something far more intimate. There were no explicit messages, nothing that directly spelled out what was happening, but the undertones were clear. This wasn't a coworker. This wasn't a friend. This was something else. I scrolled further, my stomach twisting tighter with each message. And then I saw a name. Liam. My best friend. The one person I never would have suspected. The one person I had trusted almost as much as I had trusted my wife. The messages weren't filled with confessions of love or declarations of passion, but they didn't have to be. It was the way they spoke to each other, the comfort, the familiarity, the way she told him things she didn't tell me. The way she laughed with him in texts the way she hadn't laughed with me in months. The way she sent him pictures, little moments from her day, things she never shared with me anymore. It wasn't just emotional. It was worse than that. It was intimacy. The kind of connection that should have belonged to me, that should have been something only we shared. And she had given it to him. I put her phone back exactly how I found it, my hands still trembling, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. My mind was spinning, a tornado of emotions crashing into each other: rage, betrayal, disbelief, heartbreak. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was real. This was happening. Emily was cheating on me, and she was doing it with my best friend. I sat there in silence, staring at the floor, trying to process what I had just seen. Part of me wanted to confront her the second she stepped out of the shower, to throw her phone in her face and demand answers. But I knew better. She would deny it. She would twist it. She would find a way to make me feel like I was overreacting. She had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. She wasn't going to suddenly start telling the truth just because I had found a few messages that I needed more. I needed something she couldn't explain away, something undeniable. Because when I finally confronted her, I wanted her to have no way out. No excuses. No manipulation. Just the truth that I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her, listening to her breathing, knowing that the woman I had married, the woman I had built my life with, was lying to me, deceiving me, betraying me in ways I had never imagined. And the worst part? She had done it all so effortlessly, so naturally, without even a hint of guilt. She had spent months choosing him over me. Now, it was time for me to make my choice. That I woke up feeling like a stranger in my own life. The bed I had shared with Emily for years, the woman sleeping soundly beside me, the home we had built together, it all felt foreign now, like I was looking at a place that didn't belong to me anymore. My mind was stuck in an endless loop, replaying everything I had seen in her phone, analyzing every message, every interaction, every subtle betrayal that had been happening right under my nose. She had been talking to Liam for weeks, maybe months. Maybe even longer. The tone of their messages wasn't just casual, wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. It was familiar. It was filled with an emotional closeness that she no longer shared with me. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of her breathing as she slept peacefully, completely unaware that I knew. I wondered if she had dreamed about him. If she had fallen asleep thinking about him instead of me. If she had woken up in the middle of the night to check her phone, hoping for a message from him, making sure I was still asleep before responding. The thought made my stomach turn. That I forced myself to act normal when she finally woke up. I kissed her forehead when she sleepily mumbled good morning. I asked her if she wanted coffee. I did everything the way I always had because I needed time to figure out my next move. If I confronted her now, she would deny everything. I knew she would. I had spent years with this woman, I knew how she operated. She would twist it around, make me question myself, manipulate the situation until somehow I was the one apologizing. I wasn't going to let that happen. That I needed proof. So I started watching her closely. Every little thing she did became evidence. The way she checked her phone more than usual. The way she smiled at messages and quickly put her phone away when I walked into the room. The way she suddenly seemed so interested in going out, meeting up with friends, staying out late, always with some vague excuse that left just enough details open-ended so that I couldn't immediately disprove them. She had been so careful before, so meticulous in covering her tracks. But now that I was looking for it, the cracks in her story became obvious. I started noticing when she would take extra time getting ready, when she would put on perfume just to grab groceries, when she would spend more time than necessary in the car after pulling into the driveway, finishing up a conversation before coming inside, and then, one evening, I got my confirmation. Emily had told me she was meeting up with a coworker for dinner. It was supposed to be a casual thing, just catching up, nothing major. But something felt off. She had spent extra time picking out her outfit, had changed her top twice, had even put on a new shade of lipstick I hadn't seen before. And when she kissed me goodbye, it felt rehearsed. Forced. Like she was playing the role of the devoted wife, making sure I didn't suspect anything. The second she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept my distance, making sure she wouldn't notice me. My heart was pounding in my chest, every rational part of my brain screaming at me to stop, telling me I was about to see something I couldn't take back. But I couldn't turn around. I had to know. She didn't go to a restaurant, she went to a hotel that I parked across the street, watching as she stepped out of her car, looked around, and then quickly walked inside. She didn't hesitate. She didn't check her phone for directions. She knew exactly where she was going, like she had been there before. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, trying to come up with any possible explanation that wasn't the obvious one. Maybe she was meeting a friend who was staying there. Maybe there was some work-related event happening. Maybe, and then I saw him, Liam, walking into the hotel less than 5 minutes after she did. There was no misunderstanding anymore. No explanation that could justify this. No excuse she could make that would make me believe anything other than the truth. My wife was having an affair with my best friend, and now, I had seen it with my own eyes. I sat there, frozen, watching as the two of them disappeared inside, knowing exactly what was happening behind those walls. I felt numb. I felt like I was outside of my own body, looking in on someone else's life. I don't know how long I sat there before finally starting the car and driving away. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly, letting the city lights blur together, my mind spiraling in every direction. How long had this been going on? When had it started? Had it been innocent at first, just harmless flirting that turned into something more? Or had it always been this way? Had I just been too blind to see it? Had she ever loved me at all? The realization settled over me like a heavy weight. My marriage was over. Even if she begged for forgiveness, even if she cried and promised that it was a mistake, there was no coming back from this. She had broken something between us that could never be repaired. She had made her choice, and now, it was time for me to make mine. I drove for hours, my mind running in circles, trying to process the fact that my wife was in a hotel room with my best friend. Every memory I had with them felt poisoned now. Every laugh we had shared, every time the three of us had been in the same room together, every casual conversation, every inside joke, it had all been a lie. The betrayal wasn't just from Emily. It was from Liam too. The man I had trusted like a brother, the one who had been there through every major event in my life, the one who had stood beside me at my wedding, smiling, giving a speech about how lucky I was to have found someone like Emily. He had looked me in the eye so many times, knowing what he was doing behind my back, that I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I pulled into my driveway sometime after midnight. The house felt different, darker, colder, like it already knew it wasn't ours anymore. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the fire burning inside me. I didn't want to explode when I confronted her. I didn't want to give her the chance to paint me as the irrational one, the overreacting husband who let his emotions cloud his judgment. I needed to be in control. Emily wasn't home yet. Of course, she wasn't. I went inside, sat down in the living room, and waited. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. The engine cut off. The door opened, then closed. I listened to her footsteps approaching, her keys jingling as she unlocked the door. She walked in like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just spent the night with another man, like she hadn't destroyed everything we had built together. I watched her, silent, as she kicked off her shoes, let out a tired sigh, and tossed her purse onto the counter. Her hair was a little messy, her makeup slightly faded, her expression one of exhaustion, not guilt, not regret. She didn't even realize I was sitting there until she turned around and saw me. That was when the first flicker of something passed over her face, not shock. Not fear, annoyance, like I was the one inconveniencing her. I didn't speak right away. I wanted her to feel the weight of the silence. I wanted her to realize that this was different, that whatever lie she had prepared wasn't going to work this time. Her eyes flickered to her phone, then back to me. She was calculating. Trying to figure out what I knew, how much I had seen, what angle she needed to take, and then, just like I expected, she sighed dramatically and rolled her eyes. She was about to lie, she was about to act like I was crazy, like I was imagining things, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. But she didn't get the chance, because before she could even open her mouth, I spoke first, and I told her exactly what I knew. Emily stood there, her eyes fixed on me, her body tense as if she already knew. Something was wrong but wasn't sure just how bad it was yet. I could see the gears turning in her head, the quick calculations, the way she was trying to gauge whether she could spin the situation in her favor. She was preparing to lie, to twist the truth, to manipulate the conversation before it even started. But I wasn't going to give her that chance. I had spent too long ignoring the signs, too long believing in the version of her that I thought existed, too long thinking that I knew the person standing in front of me. But now I did. I had seen the truth, and there was no way for her to talk her way out of it. I told her exactly what I knew. I told her about the messages, about the way she had been acting differently, about how I had noticed every little change, every suspicious moment, every excuse she had given me over the past few months. I told her how I had followed her, how I had seen her walk into that hotel like she had done it 100 times before, how I had watched Liam arrive minutes later, how I had sat there, knowing exactly what was happening behind those walls. I told her everything in a calm, measured tone, never raising my voice, never showing emotion, just letting the weight of my words settle in the air between us. I wanted to see how she would react, what her instinctive response would be when she realized she had no way out. For a moment, she said nothing. Her face didn't crumble into guilt or remorse. She didn't cry or break down, didn't stammer out apologies or beg for forgiveness. Instead, she narrowed her eyes slightly, her lips pressing together in that familiar way she always did when she was irritated. She wasn't ashamed. She was annoyed. Annoyed that she had been caught. Annoyed that I had been paying attention. Annoyed that she wasn't going to be able to control the situation. Then, she scoffed. Not a nervous laugh, not a guilty chuckle, an outright scoff, like I had just accused her of something ridiculous. She rolled her eyes, shaking her head, acting as if I was overreacting, as if I had somehow made all of this up in my head. She told me I was being paranoid, that I had misinterpreted what I saw, that I was acting like a jealous, insecure husband. She spoke with such confidence, such ease, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times and had already decided how she would handle it. She told me I was crazy, that I was seeing things that weren't there, that I was embarrassing myself by even bringing it up, but what she didn't realize was that I was no longer the man she had been deceiving. I wasn't the naive husband who would question himself, who would doubt his instincts, who would let her gaslight him into believing that the truth wasn't real. I had seen enough. I had felt enough. And I wasn't going to let her make me feel like the fool here. I knew exactly what had happened. I had the proof. I had watched it with my own eyes. She could say whatever she wanted, but there was no twisting reality this time. That I let her talk, let her dig her own hole, let her say all the things that I knew she thought would manipulate me into letting it go. But I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just stood there, watching her, letting her see the emptiness in my expression, the way I was no longer emotionally connected to her words. And that was when something in her shifted. She could see that I wasn't buying it, that I wasn't falling into the trap she had set, that her words were bouncing off of me like they meant nothing. She tried a different tactic then. Her face softened, her posture relaxed, her voice dropped into something softer, more delicate, more apologetic. She told me I was imagining things because I had been stressed lately, that I had been working too much, that maybe we just needed some time together. She reached for me then, placed a hand on my arm like she thought physical affection would undo everything. But I stepped back. And in that moment, she knew. She knew that it was over. That I was done. That no amount of manipulation, no amount of deflection, no amount of fake concern was going to undo the damage she had done. That I told her I was leaving. That was when the mask finally cracked. The anger returned, sharper this time, more desperate. She demanded to know where I was going, told me I was being dramatic, that I was throwing everything away over a misunderstanding. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. And she knew it. She just didn't want to admit it. Because admitting it would mean losing the power she had over me, the control she had wielded so easily for so long. But I wasn't hers to manipulate anymore. I grabbed my bag, the one I had packed earlier that night before she had even walked through the door. I had already made my decision long before this conversation had started. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage that had already been reduced to nothing. I wasn't going to fight for someone who had already chosen someone else. I wasn't going to let her keep playing games with my heart, my trust, my sanity. As I walked toward the door, she said the one thing that almost made me turn around. She told me that he didn't mean anything. That it was just a mistake. That it was never about him. That it was just something that happened because she had been feeling lost. That was when I laughed. Because if it hadn't meant anything, if it had just been a mistake, if it had never really been about him, then why had she risked everything for it? She had made her choice. She had made it over and over again, every time she texted him, every time she met up with him, every time she looked me in the eyes and lied. Now, I was making mine. I opened the door, stepped outside, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I walked out of that house knowing there was no going back. The second I stepped outside, the weight of everything hit me at once. The betrayal, the deception, the months of lies, it all crashed down, but instead of crushing me, it fueled me. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't drowning in confusion, questioning whether I was overreacting, wondering if I had misunderstood what I had seen. No, I was finally seeing things clearly. Emily had tried every tactic to manipulate me. First, she acted like I was crazy, like I had imagined it all, as if gaslighting me would make me question the truth. Then, when she realized that wasn't working, she tried to soften the blow, acting like she cared, like this was just a misunderstanding that we could fix. And when that failed, she turned cold, angry, defiant, trying to make it seem like I was the one ruining our marriage. But none of it worked. Because I had already made my decision. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just needed to get away from that house, from the memories, from the person who had betrayed me so effortlessly. The streets blurred together as I drove aimlessly, my mind replaying everything that had led up to this moment. The late nights, the phone turned screen down, the sudden change in attitude, the fights she picked out of nowhere, the distance that had grown between us while she had been giving herself to someone else. It was all so obvious now, like a puzzle that had been staring me in the face the whole time, waiting for me to put the pieces together. I ended up at a hotel, the kind of place you check into when you have nowhere else to go. The room was small, cold, impersonal, but at least it was mine. At least it was free of her. I threw my bag onto the bed and sat down, staring at the wall, letting the silence settle in. It was strange, being alone, knowing that my life had just changed forever. I had always imagined that if my marriage ended, it would be because we had drifted apart over time, because life had pulled us in different directions, because we had decided together that it was time to move on. I never thought it would be like this. So sudden. So violent in its finality. So irreversible. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen, debating my next move. There were messages from her, of course. She had started texting me almost immediately after I left, but I hadn't read them yet. I already knew what they would say. A mix of anger, guilt, excuses. Probably some desperate attempt to control the narrative, to make herself feel better about what she had done, to convince me that I was making a mistake by leaving. I opened them anyway. The first few were predictable. Can we talk? You're overreacting. I can explain. Then, as I kept scrolling, the tone shifted. I can't believe you're just walking away like this. Are you seriously throwing everything away over one mistake? You're being immature. And then, finally, the true Emily came out. Fine. Leave. You were never enough for me anyway. I stared at that last message, the words burning into my brain. There it was. The truth, finally spoken, stripped of the fake concern, the forced guilt, the desperate attempts at manipulation. I had always suspected that deep down, she didn't respect me the way she pretended to. And now, I had confirmation. I put my phone down, turned it off, and leaned back against the bed. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel regret. I just felt done. Emily and I were over. I had nothing left to say to her. Now, it was time to rebuild. I didn't go to work the next day. I didn't check my phone. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I just existed, floating in this strange space between my old life and whatever was supposed to come next. The weight of everything settled in my chest, not as grief, not as rage, but as something heavier: finality. There was no fixing this. No undoing it. My marriage wasn't crumbling, it had already collapsed. That I had spent so much time trying to convince myself that Emily was still the woman I had married, that this was just a rough patch, that maybe I was imagining the distance, the coldness, the lies. But now, I saw things clearly. She had never stopped to consider how her actions would affect me. She had built a second life with Liam, had invested time and effort into deceiving me, had spent months making me feel like I was crazy for noticing what was right in front of me. And now that she had been caught, now that she knew she couldn't manipulate her way out of it, she was angry. Not at herself. At me. That I knew I would have to go back to the house eventually, but not yet. I wasn't ready to face the mess she had left behind. I wasn't ready to pack up years of memories, to sort through what was mine and what was hers, to step into the place where I had once felt safe and now felt nothing but disgust. Instead, I focused on the next step, making sure that she didn't get a single thing from me. That I called a lawyer. I explained the situation, laid out everything I knew, told him I wanted to move forward with the divorce as quickly as possible. He asked me for details: dates, proof, any concrete evidence that could strengthen my case. I told him I had messages, locations, everything needed to show that she had broken our vows beyond any reasonable doubt. I didn't care about revenge. I didn't care about making her suffer. I just wanted out. I wanted her to have no power over me, no way to twist this into something that benefited her. And then, while I was still in that meeting, my phone buzzed. It was Liam. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer. What could he possibly have to say? What excuse could he give that would make any of this better? I almost let it go to voicemail, but then something inside me shifted. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the pathetic justification he had been rehearsing in his head since the moment I caught them. I picked up. The first thing I noticed was that he sounded nervous. Not the usual confident, easygoing version of Liam that I had known for years. He stammered, hesitated, his voice cracking in places as he tried to figure out where to start. He said he was sorry, that he never meant for things to go this far, that he hadn't planned for this to happen. He said he valued our friendship, that he didn't want to lose me over a mistake. That I let him talk. Let him dig his hole deeper. And then, when he was finished, I told him exactly what I thought of him. I told him he was a coward. That he had looked me in the eye, time and time again, knowing what he was doing behind my back. That he had been in my home, had shared drinks with me, had given me advice about my own marriage while sneaking around with my wife. I told him that he wasn't sorry for what he had done, he was sorry for being caught. That if I had never found out, he would have kept going, would have continued playing the role of the loyal friend while taking what wasn't his. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just let the weight of my words settle. And when I was done, I hung up without waiting for a response. Liam was out of my life. Emily, however, wasn't done yet. By the time I returned to the hotel, she had bombarded my phone with messages. At first, they were more of the same manipulative attempts to twist the narrative, to make herself the victim, to make me question whether I was reacting too harshly. But when I didn't respond, the tone shifted. She was angry now. Furious that I wasn't giving her the chance to control the situation. She accused me of being cruel, of being heartless, of abandoning her. As if she hadn't been the one who had destroyed everything. Then, the final message came in: if you're going to keep acting like this, then maybe I should just be with Liam. At least he actually listens to me. I stared at the words, feeling nothing. No pain. No anger. Just confirmation. She had never loved me. Not in the way I had loved her. She had spent our entire marriage lying to me, pretending to be someone she wasn't, and now that her true self had been exposed, she was lashing out. I turned off my phone, put it on the bedside table, and lay back against the pillow. Emily had spent months making her choice. Now, I was making mine, and I was never looking back. That I didn't respond to Emily's last message. There was nothing left to say. She had already shown me who she was. There was no point in arguing, no point in engaging, no point in giving her even a sliver of control over me again. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to fight, to scream, to beg for answers, to try and make sense of something that had never made sense in the first place. But I was done trying to make sense of a person who had built her life on lies. That I let the divorce move forward with brutal efficiency. I stayed quiet, let my lawyer handle everything, made it clear that I wanted this to be over as soon as possible. Emily, of course, resisted at first. She tried to delay things, dragged out negotiations, tried to find loopholes that would benefit her. She demanded more than she was entitled to, tried to argue that she deserved more because of all the years she had put into our marriage. As if the years she spent cheating on me counted for anything. But she had nothing to stand on. I had the evidence, the proof of her betrayal. I had time-stamped messages, location data, records of her secret meetings with Liam, every piece of deception laid out in black and white. And when she realized that she wasn't going to be able to manipulate her way out of this, her tune changed. She started playing the victim, acting like I was being cruel for cutting her out so easily, as if she hadn't been the one to destroy everything we had built. That I ignored her. And then, when she saw that I wasn't giving her the attention she craved, she did exactly what I expected her to do. She ran to Liam. That I don't know if she actually loved him, if they had ever truly cared about each other, or if he was just the most convenient option now that she had no one else. But she went to him, and from what little I heard through mutual acquaintances, it wasn't the fairy tale romance she had convinced herself it would be. Liam wasn't the man she had built up in her head. He wasn't some perfect escape from the life she had with me. He was just a man who had been willing to betray his best friend for a cheap thrill. And as it turned out, that thrill didn't last. They didn't even make it 6 months. I don't know the details. I don't care about the details. But I heard enough to know that Emily had jumped from one sinking ship to another. Liam wasn't the romantic savior she had convinced herself he was. He wasn't the answer to all of her problems. He was just another selfish person, just like her. And once the excitement of sneaking around was gone, once the thrill of betraying me had faded, reality set in. They were just two broken people, clinging to each other because they had nothing else. And then, predictably, it all fell apart. She tried to reach out to me after that. A message here, a call there. Always something vague, something that left the door open for a response. I miss talking to you. I wish things had ended differently. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I never answered, not because I was angry. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because she no longer existed to me. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Clean, simple, no further complications. I signed the papers, walked away, and never looked back. That I rebuilt my life. It wasn't easy at first. The weight of betrayal doesn't disappear overnight. But eventually, I stopped thinking about her. I stopped replaying the past, stopped wondering when things had gone wrong, stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. Because the truth was, I had done nothing wrong. This had never been about me. It had always been about her. Emily had spent years lying to herself, convincing herself that happiness was just out of reach, that there was always something better, that she deserved more. And in the end, she got exactly what she deserved. Nothing. That I moved on. I built a new life, one free of deception, one where I wasn't constantly second-guessing my partner's loyalty, one where I didn't wake up wondering if the person next to me was telling me the truth. That I never spoke to Emily again, and I never regretted it.